51st anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War, June 25th, 1950. So this is our forum here, and we're all delighted to have you all join us. Our next forum will not be until the fall sometime, and we're gonna have our nurses who have been in the MASHs and have served with our units during our wartime services on our 10th program for this series. I'd like to introduce our director, Mr. Alan Harper, for his welcoming comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alan. I am so appreciative of the efforts that you put into this, because I really think it's one of the best things that we do as a medical center to have our employees come down and hear stories about our experiences of our heroes. And that's what all of our veterans are. You're all heroes, and we really appreciate the great service that you provided to this country. And I really want to extend an appreciation to all our panel members today, and encourage you to look at the back of the program that gives you a little bio on him. We're very, very honored, and today is really a very special occasion today, because we have a recipient of the Medal of Honor here today, and Colonels, we are so delighted to have you with us, and honored to have you in our presence. It's what it's all about, and we're delighted to have you, and I don't want to take up any more time. Let's get into the program. Thank you.
Pledge of Allegiance this afternoon will be led by Colonel James Stone, who is a recipient of our Medal of Honor, the highest decoration, and that you usually die when you get it in the United States military. But we're delighted that he lived through it and is here to be here with as our guest today. Lives in Arlington, and I'd like to read the citation for the award as it was presented. First Lieutenant James L. Stone, United States Army. Citation: First Lieutenant James Stone, U.S. Army, Company F, 2nd Battalion, 8th Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division, distinguished himself by conspicuous gallantry and indomitable courage above and beyond the call of duty in action against the enemy on 21 and 22 November 1941 near Sokkogae, as close I can come to it, Korea. A vital outpost position was attacked by overwhelming Chinese forces. Erect and exposed to the terrific enemy fire, calmly directing his men, and thrower failing to function, he personally moved to its location, further exposing himself. Throughout a second attack, First Lieutenant Stone, though painfully wounded, personally from place to place in the position in order to bring fire upon the Chinese advancing from two directions. Throughout, he continued to encourage and direct his depleted platoon in its hopeless defense. Although again wounded, he continued the fight with his carbine, still exposing himself as an example to his men. When this final overwhelming assault swept over the platoon's position, his voice could still be heard, faintly urging his men to carry on until he lost consciousness. Only because of this officer's driving spirit and heroic action was the platoon emboldened to make its brave, hopeless, last-ditch stand. I know I'm going to ask you all to stand, obviously, for our Pledge of Allegiance, followed by our national anthem, sung by Sharon Balthrop from our staff. But obviously, as you stand, you are also honoring the presence of our Medal of Honor recipient, Colonel Stone.
Before we get into the Pledge of Allegiance, I want to say I had my citizenship taken away for about almost 2 years. And under the communist government, you don't even own the clothes on your back. They tell you what to say, what you cannot say. And you can't imagine what it is to come across the line in Korea and see the American flag. It really, what's the words, you feel down deep. I want to say this to you. I thank my God that I was born in the United States of America, and I do have citizenship here. It's worth fighting for. Now, would you...
We're so gallantly streaming, and the rockets ring clear, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, Who say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
This is Don Jones, well known to all of us here. He is a veteran of the Korean War and was in the 1st Cavalry Division. He will lead us in our invocation, present the invocation.
Lord, we're grateful to be here this afternoon. Be with us through this ceremony. Lord, we're grateful that we've survived war and we're saddened for the ones that didn't make it back. Lord, be with the families of the ones that didn't make it, and be with our MIAs and our POWs. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Please be seated. This is all a part of an educational process, as you know, for our programs. But as a part of the education of the veteran culture, I wanted to say some things about the Legion of Valor. The Legion of Valor was founded and organized April 23rd, 1890 in Washington, D.C. by a group of Civil War and Indian Campaign veterans who had been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, and membership was restricted to recipients of this medal, our top award, obviously. In 1918, recipients of the Distinguished Service Cross were declared eligible for membership. That's the 2nd highest award in the United States Army. And in 1933, the Navy Cross recipients were admitted to the Legion. The Navy Cross is the 2nd highest award in the Navy, obviously. The Air Cross is the 2nd highest award in the Air Force. So we have the Medal of Honor recipients are eligible for membership in the Legion of Valor, and we have not very many are available and eligible to join it, much less are in the organization. And besides the Congressional Medal of Honor Society is probably the 2nd most valued and honorable organization to be in. And so let you all know something about this very small elite organization that it takes a great deal to get into it, you know, obviously, to have these 2 highest decorations. We have in our primary service area of the 40 counties, including Oklahoma, and all the veterans that live in these counties, to our knowledge, we only have 6 members of that are eligible to be in the Legion of Valor. One of them, William Wilhoit, who received the Navy Cross on D-Day, was our guest for our D-Day program. There are 5 other members of this organization. 2 of them were not able to be here today, but 3 are able to be here today. Obviously, our Medal of Honor recipient, one of our panelists, Dick Agnew, who will be further introduced, and the action for which he received the Distinguished Service Cross will be exemplified by the answers to his questions that our moderator will be drawing out. We have a 3rd member of this organization that is with us today, Colonel Dean Dattar, who is a recipient of the Air Cross from Vietnam service. I asked Colonel Dattar to come up with just a small little token of the appreciation of the Legion of Valor and their involvement. This is a satisfied customer, he told me. He uses us and he's a satisfied customer, and he has a small token here he'd like to present to you. Colonel Stone and Dick Agnew are also the 2 other members from the Legion of Valor that are present. Thank you.
Oh, that's great.
I'm sure the guys will be more happy something.
Oh, definitely. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
For any of you all who would like to see what these medals look like, obviously you can come right up to Colonel Stone and see what that one looks like for sure. But I have copies of the awards, and I will have them up front if any of you'd like to see those. Don Jones has some pictures of him when he was a soldier in Korea that he was showing me before this. I said, Don, who is that good-looking, slim guy like we all were at one time in our life? But Don's got those pictures to show anybody that'd like to come up afterwards in the program. We're going to begin the part of our program, which is the main part, of course, which is our panel discussion. I would like to introduce our moderator today. As you you all probably know that have been devotees of this program, I've always been the moderator. I figured I ought to get somebody that's been in this war to be the moderator. So I picked a gentleman that is well known to many people in the veteran community. His name is Major General Dick Mulberry. He was a naval aviation cadet who entered active duty in August 1941. He was commissioned July 1942. In World War II, he was deployed to the South Pacific and flew airplanes as a Marine Corps pilot. He joined a carrier air group there. He was ready for the Japan invasion. He'd been out there, came back to the States, and went back again. He went off active duty, and then he came back, called up for the Korean War on March 1st, 1951. He flew missions off the Rendova, which was a Navy carrier, flew the F-4 Corsair. Totally, in the two wars, World War II and the Korean War, he flew 300 missions between the two wars. He came back to the reserves after the Korean War, promoted to Major General. He actually went on a special mission to Vietnam, so he really has service in 3 wars. He's a recipient of the Legion of Merit, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and several air medals. We have a distinguished gentleman to replace me as moderator for this program today, and I'd like you to welcome Dick Mulberry, who will lead our Q&A. Thank you.
Alan, nobody can replace you. Well, June 25th has become quite a famous and infamous day. Some of you remember that General Custer, who incidentally finished at the bottom of his class at West Point, became a general rank officer at age 23, met his demise on June 25th. There weren't enough troops. There were too many Indians. June 25th is a date that the Marines solidified and completed their mission at Belleau Woods in World War I. On June 25th of another year, the Marine Corps accepted the first big helicopter that they owned. So it's become quite a famous and infamous day, but the most infamous was June 25th, 1950, when the communists invaded South Korea. And that's why we're here, to talk about that. 50, 51, 52, there were a lot of well-known names: Truman, MacArthur, Ridgway, Syngman Rhee, Trygve Lie, Stalin, Mao Zedong. All of these made the news. But the 3 panelists didn't make the news, but they performed heroic deeds. And I'd like to ask them some questions, starting with Robert Ayala on my left. Robert enlisted in the U.S. Army December 22nd, 1948, deployed with D Battery, 15th Anti-Aircraft Self-Propelled Artillery Battalion to the Republic of South Korea via Incheon Landing. During Chosin Reservoir Battle, November to December 1950, was in combat 4 days, 5 nights, non-stop. Received the Purple Heart, and believe it or not, the Good Conduct Medal. Robert, how did you get to Korea?
How did I get to Korea? A ship.
What ship was it?
That was a General Black. And on the 3rd day, the General Black, we hit a typhoon. The General Black motor broke down, and it took us about 4 weeks to tow us into Japan, Sasebo.
Tell us what happened when you crossed the international date line. Anything?
Well, not really. It's just.
I'm surprised.
We were just sick all over, all through the ways.
I see. Well,
everybody got sick.
How did you land? Where and how did you land in Korea?
Well, we went to Sasebo. From Sasebo, we went to Camp Atsugi. From Camp Atsugi, we drove to Mount Fujiyama. And we stayed at Mount Fujiyama, and then we went to Karikai. We fired out there, practiced with our M19s and M16s. And then when on September when the Korean invasion started. We was right on it with the invasion, you know.
Now, where did you do your first amphibious landing?
We landed at Incheon. I went in on the second wave
At Incheon?
at Incheon.
Tell us about the tides.
Well, when we landed, we was on an LST. We got on our M19s, and we didn't have no trouble really. We got into it, but we didn't fire a shot till we got up on top. You know, after we got up on top, then start firing at some snipers that was sniping at us. But it wasn't that bad. It's not like Battle of the Balls, nothing like that.
Was that pretty much the only resistance that you unit had?
No, as we got in farther, we had more resistance. We started to get more fire from North Koreans, you know, that was hitting on the huts. And I put a couple of rounds in them huts and blow them up. And, that's about it, you know. We just kept going there till we hit Seoul. We got on the outskirts of Seoul. After about 10 days, something like that, we come on back to, they sent us back to Busan. So we drove all the way to Busan.
Backing up, did you land initially at Busan Harbor?
No.
You didn't disembark at Busan?
No.
I mean,
No, we landed, we drove all the way down on our M90s to Busan. And from Busan, we watched the Bob Hope show right there in October. And then after the Bob Hope show, we boarded the ship again, and they took us to Iwon. We landed at Iwon, North Korea. But when we got there, we didn't have to fire a shot. There was already, the rocks had already taken over.
did you initially land in Korea at Sasebo? Did you disembark at Sasebo originally?
No.
No, you,
No.
okay, good.
No.
So, a lot of people don't know, Sasebo is probably one of the deepest harbors in that part of the world. Well, how did you get to Chosin then? I know you got to Chosin.
Well, when we got to E1, we drove to Hamhong, then we drove to Hamdong. And we drove through Coterie, we drove all the way up to Coterie, then we went through Udemni. Right on the outskirts of Udemni, we made a right turn, and we waited here about 3 or 4 hours because the first Marine Division was still moving out. And they finally, about noon, they finally moved out, and we took over their positions at the inlet. And that's where we set up our M19s, M16s, you know. The 32nd, one of the battalions was up about 3 miles ahead of us. And we just, that night, we just got our guns ready for action, and that was our last, we had our last meal right there, this hot meal.
And what time of the year was this? What month?
Sir?
What month was this?
That was on 27 November.
Okay, I've got to ask, how
Yeah.
did you avoid,
Sir?
how did you avoid frostbite?
I did avoid frostbite.
Yes, sir.
I didn't.
You did it, okay.
No, I spent 4 days, 5 nights on that M19. I was the only one that stayed up there because I had orders not to leave the M19. Because after the first night, the Chinese were attacking pretty bad. And we just messed them all up.
Well, tell us about the enemy fire during that 3 days and 4 nights.
Well, the first night, Sergeant Brown and I was on guard, and it was about, I guess, about 10 degrees below zero. It wasn't as cold as the second, third night, but that first night it was about 10 degrees. And about 11 o'clock, 11:30, something like that, Sergeant Brown and I was just talking when the Chinese tripped the flares, and we looked at them, and it looked like a wall coming at us. The whole Chinese army was there, it looked like it was coming after us. And I was my job was to guard the 57th Field Artillery. And about 100 yards down where they was coming through, there was a little kind of a saddle, you know, where the Chinese, they had to come through there. Well, I had my guns aimed at that area right there, and all I had to do was just keep shooting because they had to walk right into the fire, line of fire.
Well, tell me, did you have in mind at that time, at that moment, that you probably would become face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball with bayonets?
Not yet, not until, see, at night, in the morning, they just attack at night till about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, then they take off. They drag some of their wounded and some of their dead back into the mountains. And in the daytime, we just hang around there, you know, and try to get something to eat. We couldn't get nothing to eat, but it was rough because that night they destroyed all our food, you know. They destroyed the mess hall. They just penetrated our lines. They took over the houses, the 57th Field Artillery, everything. They just, and well, they just they was killing everybody around there. But we finally pushed them out in the morning. You know, we forced them out of there, out of that perimeter.
Tell us about some of the weird sounds that the Chinese communists would make during the nighttime.
Well, that night, when the flares went up, we heard cymbals and cornets. We heard drums, whistles, and man, I tell you, it looked like the whole world was coming at you back then. That first morning, in the morning, I had over 150 Chinese in front of my guns, lying dead right there. So you can see how many, that was just our guns. Now, I'm not talking about the rest of the guys. We had quad 50s and they were just mowing them down. And that happened. That stayed like that for 4 days.
You were the last gunner. Tell us about John Strick. That name means something?
John Strick and my best friend, we went through. John Strick was my best friend. We went through about 2 years in the Army, and John was a gunner on an M16. And after the first night, he come over to me and said, "Robert, you think we'll ever get out of this?" I said, "John, some of us will, some of us won't." And that night, he got killed. That was my best buddy right there. And that really hurt me. But on the third night, Corporal Chavez, he was my loader, he got hit. And he kept shooting, you know, I mean, he kept feeding the guns. He was a loader, and he kept loading the guns, the cannons and the 340s. And I just kept shooting until in the morning. In the morning, we lowered him down, and he just froze to death. We didn't have no medicine, nothing. We didn't have nowhere to put him. We had a little hut in there that was full of water, but by that time we had about 300 wounded right there. And they just put him in a sleeping bag and he froze to death. He died right there. And that's when Sergeant Brown told me, "Man, don't leave this M19, just stay with it. I mean, you gotta go, you stay here. I mean, you gotta do it here and then throw it out." Well, since I didn't eat for 4 days, I didn't have to do nothing, so I stayed there.
We referred to Robert as the last gunner. You can understand why. And now you know why I referred to him as one of our heroic warriors. Thank you, Robert. I'm glad you're here. And I know that you're glad.
Gentlemen, all I do is almost keep that mic. This is the acoustics are horrible. It's got to ask the fact that these are my names. If you put me on 4
Let me introduce Admiral Bob Smith as if he needs any introduction. He raised in Utah and Los Angeles, commissioned from the Naval Aviation College program, better known as Flying Midshipman. He deployed twice to Korea, where he flew 132 combat missions, awarded 2 Legions of Merit, Combat V, correct? Distinguished Flying Cross, Navy Commendation Medal with V. Post-war received his Bachelor of Master's degree at Georgia Tech. I want you to welcome Admiral Bob Smith. Okay, Bob, tell us your first assignment as a pilot.
In combat?
Your very first assignment.
Well, it's a funny thing. Every time you go into combat, you learn something new. My first mission, I learned a lot. One of the things you do is you destroy targets that you're assigned. These may be marshalling yards, they might be bridges, they might be railroad track, where they assign you certain targets. We fly a flight of 4 airplanes. That's what the minimum fighting unit in airborne combat is. And you drop your bombs on your targets. When you've destroyed the targets, or you think to the best of your ability you've destroyed the targets, then you start returning and you go down route packages where there are targets of opportunity, where you might find a truck, a car, a train, troops, whatever. And to do this, you have 1 fly low, 2 and 3 are the attackers, the number 4 man is high, and he navigates so you don't get lost, you can find your way back. And he's also watching out for MiGs, because you don't ever want to be surprised and jump by enemy airplanes. The first mission, after we dropped our bombs and we were attacking targets on the way back, as it turns out, at one point late in the thing, I was the only one who had any ammunition left. The rest had expended all of their bombs as I had, but they'd expended all their ammunition. And the low man called out a ox cart. Now these were gigantic ox carts. They would be half the height of this area here. Big ox carts drawn by a team of 2 oxen. And the flight leader, who happened to be the CO, commanding officer, said, "Smitty, hit it." And I said, "But it's only a farmer sitting on an ox cart filled full of hay." And I saw, to me, that was no military target. Why waste ammunition on it? He says, "Hit it." And again, I tried to debate with him on the air. Finally, he gave me an order, and I went in and I hit it. Well, as I got close, got it in range, and I opened up with the 20mm cannons, all hell broke loose. It just blew up in front of me. I went through a solid sheet of flame. What I didn't know in my innocent ways, that was one of the major ways they moved ammunition and explosives down in ox carts. When I got back to ship, needless to say, I got quite a lecture, and I learned that when the commanding officer tells you that that's a target you should attack, don't doubt him, go and attack him. But it's interesting that there's a resistance in all of us, I think, to killing anything that is not a proper military target.
Bob, were you flying on a carrier out of the Yellow Sea or the Sea of Japan?
We were flying out of the Sea of Japan on the East Coast, and we'd fly. You imagine Korea split down the middle, with everything from the East Coast into the midline was Navy ships, and some of them were shelling the beaches and the shorelines, and others, the airplanes, were attacking farther inland. On the western side, then the Marines who were flying out of the small carrier and the Air Force generally attacked those areas.
Now tell us about the early morning mission when you lost your CO.
Yeah, that's another lesson I learned. The interesting thing is that I'm not superstitious. Some pilots are. Some pilots wouldn't wash their flight suit for the whole tour. That wasn't too good. But I don't dream very much. Very rarely dream. And the night when we have a very early morning mission, we've got to launch at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. We're briefed the night before, and we're just briefed on changes early in the morning. This is so that you don't have to get up at 2 or 3 o'clock to get prepared for your mission. So we were given the toughest area that particular day to destroy anti-aircraft guns. And that's one of the hardest things to do, simply because they shoot at you a lot. They can often hit you as easily as you can hit them. We were to drop bombs, and once we expended our bombs, to strafe these anti-aircraft guns, and there was quite a few of them. Well, dueling guns is an interesting thing. But that night I dreamt that I was got shot, and couldn't make it back to the ship, landed in the Wonsan Harbor there, which we controlled, and Yodo-ri, the island in the middle, was if you could get to that, you could not be captured. If you could even get to the water far enough out, the Navy ships would pick you up. We had patrol boats and destroyers all over the place. In my dream, I ditched the airplane in the sea, got out of the cockpit. I was alive, I was well, but I died before the rescue helicopter got there because the water was so cold you couldn't live in that water even with an immersion suit for more than about 3 to 10 minutes. And I thought that was a terrible way to... The next morning I told that story, and everybody my flight got a kick out of that. As we left the ready room to go on up, we passed the men, our mechanics and so forth, work on airplanes, the people loading the airplanes on the hangar deck, and we say good morning and hello. This is, you gotta understand, it's very early, it's dark, and for some reason they start saying good luck. Now, that's unusual because on a ship, all the times that I flew, I never really had people wish me good luck. It was a job to do, and luck had nothing to do with it, we didn't think. But half a dozen of them said good luck. And as we got up to the flight deck and were manning our airplanes, I happened to make the comment, I said, if I didn't know better, I think this is going to be our unlucky day. We took off, flew in, we got to the targets, the AA guns, just before the sun broke the horizon. So the sky was pale, the ground was very dark, but we could still locate our targets, and we went and started dropping our bombs. You drop them, you go in one at a time. As we went in, the flight leader was Herbert Basley, Commander Basley. You could see these tracers just zipping up at you, and you think it's going to hit me. And for some reason, you duck your head. Because that way, actually what happens, it comes up and it goes underneath you. But he got hit in the first run down. We could see smoke and flames coming out of the airplane. And one of the other pilots said, Smitty's been hurt, Smitty's been hit. I said, no, I'm all right. It's the skipper, he's the leader. And we started calling him. He never responded. His airplane went straight in. It hit perhaps 20 yards from the gun site. He almost destroyed the gun with his airplane. 2 of us got hit. In addition, our airplanes got hit, and we got back. When I got back, that was probably one of the most distressing flights I'd ever had. Because here's a man I had a great deal of admiration for, a commanding officer. He had graduated at near the top of his academy class. He was the first one in his class to command a squadron. He had a lovely wife and 2 little girls. He had so much to live for. Here I was, a bachelor, no permanent attachments. I guess I had some parents, and that would have been but they had other siblings, and I wondered, why is it that he was killed and why wasn't I killed? Because the loss, I was a junior officer, my loss really would have been, in my mind, far less to everybody than his loss. And I felt so bad about it that I went into the XO and tried to turn my wings in. Said, I don't want any more of this. He talked me out of it. Well, I was really distressed over that. I mourned over his loss. I didn't know what that was until about 40 years later when I heard about survivor guilt. And when you're in a group like this and you're in combat and you live and somebody very close to you dies, you sometimes have a tendency to think that you're part of the blame. Actually, there's no blame. There's nothing I could have done to save his life that I wanted to. But nevertheless, I had that terrible feeling of guilt that I should have died and not him. That's combat.
Admiral, I'm glad you did not earn the Purple Heart. Many of you have heard of the bridges of Sokkogae. Most of you have seen the movie. Would you explain your part in that, please?
In the movie?
Yes.
When we came back from the second cruise after the end of the war, in 1953, Paramount was starting to film the bridges of Sokkogae. And that's a story that James Michener wrote, for those who may not be familiar with it, a short novel about Navy pilots flying in Korea. And they wanted to get Navy to help them. They wanted Navy airplanes to be flown by Navy pilots. So MGM suggested they go down and ask for our squadron, because they had, before that, our squadron, a couple of years before that, had offered to do the flying in the Men of the Fighting Lady, the story of the blind pilot. But by the time they made that movie, we were back over in Korea. So they did, and they asked for VF-52, the squadron I was in. And they said, gee, it's all right with us. The Admiral said it's all right with them if the CO was agreeable. So he went to the CO who had just taken over, and he said, how long will it take? They said 2 weeks, and they said, yeah, that's fine. We have to have two people, the part of CAG and the part of Harry Brubaker, Lieutenant Brubaker, which is played by Bill Holden. We have to have those people constantly for 2 weeks. And so the CO said, Smitty, you go play Brubaker. He wanted to get me off the flight schedule and thought this would get me out of his hair for a while. I was ready to be transferred. I'd been almost 4 years in the squadron. So here I got to go play Hollywood. We were flying out of Miramar, and they painted the airplanes up the way they wanted them to look, and they would brief me on what to do, and every scene that we did in that movie was taken in one shot. They brief us, we'd do the part, and it was good. And it was sort of fun. I got to meet Bill Holden, Grace Kelly, Mickey Rooney, people like that. Paul Mancy flew the B-25 and was later killed filming the movie. But when it came down to the last scene, and by the way, Paramount had not planned to have Brubaker die. The story, as written by Michener, had him die, and they didn't. You never had the heroes die in those days. This is 1953, so he had to be rescued, and he and Grace Kelly had to go off in the sunset and live happily ever after. The technical advisor was Marshal Beebe, Commander Beebe, a very astute naval aviator. He kept pounding on it. You've got to film it the way the book is. So just to get him off their back, they decided to have two endings, and they filmed two endings. One, their script, where they rescue him and everything is happy, and the other one, which was like the book, where he died after he got on the ground. And they premiered them and let the public pick them by having comments. And the people who saw the happy ending said, nothing particular, it's okay. But those who saw the unhappy ending, where he was killed and didn't get to come back to his Nancy, they said, oh, it's so sad, I cried. And so they decided to release the one that they hadn't planned to, and that's how you got the real ending of it. It was fun for me filming that part. I had to film that particular scene, I think, 4 times. The only scene that we had to film more than once, not because of what I was doing, but, and by the way, what I was doing was, I was permitted to come down as low as possible and as close to the ground as long as I was safe. That's legalized flat hatting. I was way on the boondocks, but I got to come down about 10 feet off the ground. We started out, we had to dump fuel out, and we had tip tanks, the mechs rigged it so when I turned on transfer, I could pump fuel out through the belly of the airplane. And we went up and I dumped 240 gallons of fuel around the countryside and came back and said, oh, that's no good. Why not? Because fuel doesn't look right. What do you mean doesn't look right? It doesn't look like fuel. Well, what is fuel supposed to look like? Well, it doesn't look like that. And so, well, what it was too transparent. It looked like water, I guess. And so next day I went up and did it again, carrying 240 gallons of milk. And so I put white milk all over the countryside and came back down and said, well, it's opaque enough, but first it was brown paint, then milk, and then finally, the final day was chocolate milk. And so when you see that movie, you can tell everybody, that's not fuel, that's chocolate milk he's dumping.
Thanks, Bob. Wonder why Marine pilots never get duty like that. Very strange. Thanks, Bob. Another one of my heroes. Some of you may know Dick Agnew, originally from Massachusetts, fortunately now from Dallas. He entered the U.S. Army in 1947, enlisted, then was commissioned second lieutenant in 1952 from the Army Infantry Officer Candidate School. He assigned as a replacement platoon leader in the 223rd Infantry Regiment in Korea in May of 1953. They were still fighting bloody battles in those mountains around the 38th parallel. He received the Distinguished Service Cross and the Purple Heart. Post-war, received his bachelor's degree in business at Boston University. Dick, tell me what prompted you to join the Army. This is coming from a Marine, you understand.
I was hungry. And the Army said 3 square meals a day and 1 set of clean sheets a week. That's all I needed to have them say. And $72.50 a month.
Well, that was shortly after you finished high school, correct?
No, I dropped out of high school when I was 16.
When did you finish?
Well, 3 years later. It took me 3 years to make up that 1 year by going to school on weekends and at night when I could. That was a big mistake to drop out of high school. I thought I could make up that 1 year within a year. It took 3. And then I was asked by my company commander if I'd be interested in Officers Candidate School. And I said, well, maybe. So he sort of put the pressure on me to go, and I had to take a IQ test. In those days, you didn't need a 4-year degree to be commissioned. A high school or equivalency would do it, and I think you needed 120 rating on your IQ. I think mine was 120 and a half. That's why I went to the infantry.
Okay, what was your first airborne assignment after you were commissioned?
Oh, after I was commissioned, my first airborne assignment was platoon leader in the 508th Parachute Regimental Combat Team, which was right there at Fort Benning, Georgia, so I didn't have very far to go. And I was there a short time and then went to Korea as an infantry replacement lieutenant and sailed over on a ship, landed at Sasebo. I think we had to make out a will, and we had to zero in our rifles, get our bayonets cleaned up, and then we were on another ship within a very short period of time for Korea, and we landed at Busan. And we were put on trains with no doors and no windows and park bench seats. And then they issued us M1 rifles with ammunition. And I said to some sergeant, I said, I don't think we need ammunition now, do we? He said, well, sometimes these trains are hit at night by North Korean and Chinese guerrillas, and they shoot these trains up pretty badly. I was pretty scared. And I was very tired. I couldn't sleep. It was a very bumpy ride, but we weren't attacked. And a day and a half later, we got up to where my division was, 43rd.
How did you get to the punch bowl? Describe that operation.
Well, the punch bowl was my first encounter in Korea. I remember getting off a truck at regimental headquarters, and up on one of the rims of the bowl, there was all kinds of artillery and mortar fire coming in. I said, gee, that's a hell of a place to be. I said, what outfit is in that area? He says, he looked at me and said, well, that's where you're going, Lieutenant, tomorrow morning. Well, that's where I went. They didn't have any officers, they were all dead, and a few NCOs, and we just made the best of it.
Weren't you also involved in Heartbreak Ridge, and how did it get that name?
Because it was a heartbreaker. Some of those sightings on those cliffs, you could fall 1,500 feet straight down. I always thought the Grand Canyon was in the western part of the United States. I didn't know it went all the way to Korea, but you could fall off some of those ridges and you made quite a splash when you hit the bottom.
You also operated behind enemy lines for a while. Tell us about that.
Yes, I did, and it was interesting. I was scared to death, of course, and our company, our battalion, I guess, had shot up quite a few of the Chinese from our positions. They weren't too happy with us, and they had a lot of patrols out looking for us. We had patrols out looking for them, and one night, my point man was a sergeant. He had fallen 60 feet, and I was right behind him, and I fell 60 feet straight down. And he injured his back, and I injured my left ankle. Yeah, that was in the Heartbreak Ridge area.
Tell us about when you were wounded and evacuated to a MASH, and tell us about your experience at a MASH unit. And I want to know if it's anything like the many episodes that I've seen on television.
No. It's very professional. Just like this place is. Very professional. You don't see any crazy nurses running around in here. Or doctors with their golf cart. And, but we had fallen, and then we were able to get out of that position. And we were ambushed by a Chinese patrol, pretty big size. And we were throwing grenades, and they were throwing grenades, and we were shooting rifles and carbines, and they were shooting at us. And my sergeant was about 10 or 12 feet to my left, and he had his left leg blown off just above the knee, I believe, and his left arm, and he was still killing Chinese with his bayonet, with his arm and leg gone. And we were talking back and forth, and just about all of my 30 caliber small arms fire was bullets, rounds were gone. I turned around, and there was a Chinese soldier coming after me, and he wanted to kill me, and I was a little bit faster. I was able to do him in first, and then I was losing a lot of blood. I became very weak, and I didn't have any more rounds, but I did have 2 hand grenades. And I wanted to get as many of the Chinese as I could, so I pulled the pins on the grenades and threw the pins away. And I laid the 2 hand grenades under me, lying down on the safety handles, safety levers. And I passed out, and I knew that when they rolled me over to take my watch and take my boots, go through my pockets, that with 2 grenades going off, I could do a hell of a good job, and probably take 8 or 9 more with us. But they didn't roll me over. They kicked me, vaguely I can recall that. And a day or so later, I was unconscious, and a friendly United Nations patrol came by, and my sergeant was still alive, believe it or not. And they rolled me over, and saw the grenades and threw them, and they exploded within 2 or 3 seconds. And it was lucky that they rolled me over in the daytime, because if it had been at night, I would have killed them too. I was taken back to Battalion 8 Station, and some of the other soldiers that were wounded were taken back, and were all interviewed as to about the action. And I was taken to a MASH hospital in a helicopter, and my sergeant was taken to a MASH hospital, and he died in the helicopter on the way to the hospital. And yes, I can sympathize with you, Admiral, when you wonder, well, how come it's he and not I? But we lost a lot of good men over there.
I want to ask the audience something. Do you think he earned that distinguished cross that he was awarded later? I want to go to our latecomer. I understand why he got here late. We drove out Interstate 35, and it was a long, long parking lot. Dean Felt, raised in Illinois, enlisted December 20, 1949 in the U.S. Air Force. After 2 years in the Army National Guard, assigned in 1950 to the 19th Bombardment Group based in Okinawa as a target planner. Rode on B-29 bomber missions to Korea for bombing assessments. Parachuted to safety when his bomber was shot down, and he was awarded the Good Conduct Group. What did you first discover when you arrived at Kadena at Guam?
It was not like home. I arrived at night and started planning missions the next morning on land I had never seen. And working with the officers, I was just a airman second or a corporal at that time. But on the way over there, they had cleared me for top secret to work with the security, being able to have the targets. Okay. And then we would plan the targets, lay them out on the briefing room for the pilots to see. And then after a while, they started having me ride in the missions, occasionally to do target assessment of the bombing run, which is not very smart.
How many crews would be briefed simultaneously?
Usually 45, 15 squadrons, or 3 squadrons with 15 crews in each squadron. Crowded briefing room.
And how often did these bombing raids occur?
Almost every day. We had very few stand-downs.
Well, describe why you went on some of these missions.
They wanted to get a true photographic study of what the damage was being done by the bombing missions, where they really, if you sent in 15 aircraft fully loaded with bombs, what percentage of hit were we getting? Because to come back and do recon, high-level recon, 5, 6, 7 days later, a lot of times the runway had been almost totally rebuilt.
What altitude did you use on these missions?
Went in on the mission at 17.5 to 18.5 on the mission, and would come back and do it at 12,000.
Did you take enemy fire at that altitude?
You took enemy fire at the high level, and you definitely took it at the low level.
Did you all make any emergency landing?
We made an emergency landing, I believe it was called K-15, south of the 38th. We had run out of enough engines to keep 29 afloat.
What's the name of the nearest town to K-15? Do you remember?
I don't know. I wasn't there that long.
Could be Daegu.
Sounds familiar.
Did the MiGs attack you on any of these missions?
Yes. They did not like the B-29s, though. We had a pretty good sting. We had a lot different than the B-45s they sent in a couple of times.
How many gun positions in the airplane?
There are 2 upper turrets, 2 lower turrets, and a tail gun.
Well, describe your emotions when you're on these missions.
The first time was sheer fright. I'd never been shot at before. And It kind of grows on you though after a while. You realize that they're shooting out there and they really can't hit you. They're firing, but they can't come in close enough to be accurate with their range, or the top of the central fire control could return fire.
Did you operate out of Kadena the entire time you were over there?
Yes.
Except for the brief stay in Korea?
Yes, and
When you had the emergency land?
and a brief stay in Japan when we came out after landing on the wrong side of the Yellow.
Tell me how many crews your squadron lost during that period.
We didn't lose full crews except about 6 times at the time. But we did lose several men on the ships until we started getting good fighter protection. We were far enough inland and north that the fighters really couldn't come with us. They ran out of fuel.
Where did you pick up your fighter coverage? In Korea, or they didn't go from Kadena with you?
We usually picked it up either at the 38th or north of the 38th parallel, because they had to come in off of the seas on either side off of carriers.
So most of your fighter cover was furnished by the Navy off carriers, right?
We had some fighter coverage by the Air Force, but it wasn't that much because they were south of us, and they could take us in a little ways, but they couldn't take us clear north.
Thank you, Dean. Another one of my heroes.
I know that we're running over here, and I apologize, but it looks like most of our employees have gone back to work anyway, and so there are other guests in the room, but I'm going to keep going here because we have a very important gentleman to make some comments. I had met him after I'd set my panel up already, or I can assure you he would have been on the panel, but you know something of his story already, our Medal of Honor recipient guest. But just one other thing that I want to say about Dean, and then we're going to move on to our last presenter today. But Dean, let me just tell this story quickly, Dean, if I may. Dean's bomber was shot down over Manchuria, and the entire 12-man crew bailed out and landed on the ground and reassembled and came across the Yalu River into North Korea as a crew, and were protected by friendly guerrillas in North Korea, and then were taken out to the coast, and I guess it was Air Force AC Rescue was able to take all 12 of them out. That's a story that probably took several decades to be able to be told, that we had people that went into Manchuria during the war and came out alive. We'll have our last presenter who has stories that he'd like to tell about his time in Korea also. I'll just go ahead and introduce Mr. Wright. Colonel Stone, you're on, sir, and whatever you'd like to say, you have the floor for as long as you want.
All right, thank you. As long as I like.
Yes, sir. Until there's anybody left, sir. But I can assure you, many people will stay as long as you talk.
Well, I'm glad to be here with you this afternoon. Very briefly, I'll tell you about something that happened in a POW camp, kind of humorous. People often think about escaping, how difficult it is. Well, it was not difficult. Getting out of the compound was very simple. Now, most of the people that did try to escape, they got about 25 or 30 miles down the road and they got lost. So they had to turn themselves in to the Chinese, and they brought them back. Now, a couple others there, a couple men decided they would escape during the middle of winter. 27, 35 degrees below zero, right in the middle of the night, and kind of snowing conditions. Well, the second night, they broke back into the compound. So I want to assure you that escapes were made, but they didn't go too far. Now, we had 46% of our officers' compound I was in was composed of British officers, NCOs, and it occurred to them during the last part of, I believe, the year 1953. Not a single one of them had made an attempt to escape. So they talked about it for about 2 weeks, trying to get someone to escape. Finally, they found 2 second lieutenants who reluctantly escaped. They didn't even get 1,000 yards down the road. And the Chinese brought them back, and that ended the British try to escape, whatever it was they tried. I'll tell you another little incident which I thought was real amazing. We had what you call organized softball team, and we played among ourselves by branches and so forth: Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. Well, the Army wasn't doing too well at that time, and I was playing second base, and anybody that messed up generally got a quick trip to the creek. Well, I got thrown into the creek twice. It didn't take me long to mess up. Well, then all of a sudden, somebody come up with the idea, this field grade officer who was manager of the team, that field grade officers would be thrown into the creek also. And sure enough, they messed up in a hurry, one of them. And I got a lot of pleasure in helping throw the field grade officers into the creek. That seemed to be a major achievement there for about 2 weeks. So it spread throughout the compound that any field grade officer or anybody that messed up would be thrown into the creek. You'd be surprised how much our softball improved. Now, another real amusing incident when I come across the line, of course. Nurses, can you hear me there? You talk about, they got a hold of me and they said, "Here, take this." I had about 6 or 7 shots given to me. It wasn't a simple, boy, just as hard as they could give it. I was feeling pretty good, but after they got through, I wasn't feeling too well. Now, when I come back from overseas and got off the boat in San Francisco, I was one of the first officers off, probably the first. And the interesting thing to see, 2 of my friends were met by their wives. And then they were promptly introduced, my friends, to their new husbands. They said, here, I want you to meet my husband. Now, that happened twice. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, one guy got off behind me who I knew, and he had 2 wives sitting there waiting on him. You know, I knew him for over 18 months, and not once did he tell me he was a Mormon. And I could go on and tell you some more, but I would like to, if there's permission, throw it open to questions. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask at this time?
I am sure all the panelists will have questioners come up. But are there any? Yes, yeah, Jim, come on up. Well, this mic's hot right here. He was a POW.
Right there, Jim.
Right there, right behind you.
Good. Were you at camp number 5 in Pyeongtaek?
Yes, sir.
All right. I was at camp number 2 down the road about 10 kilometers away from you.
I know you was in Camp 5 at one time where the officers were.
Yes, that's true.
Then they moved out to Camp 2.
That's correct.
And a lot of my officers were captured, and I'm sure you know a few of them.
I probably did.
And I see some of them at the XPOW reunions that we have, and we're having one in Louisville, Kentucky, in the 1st of August, and we'd like to have you there. And you'd meet a lot of old friends. Conley Clark comes to, you know him, I'm sure.
Who?
Conley Clark.
Yes, I do. I used to play basketball with him, and he messed up once in a while.
Did he go to the creek?
I'm sure we all did.
He and I were on the same volleyball team, and I was the set man, and he was generally the spiker.
Then one other man that I remember very well was he's a surgeon now in California, and he was the doctor at the camp when we first got to Camp 5. And
What was the doctor's name? Anderson?
No,
Paget? Essenstein?
no, I can't remember his name right now.
If you don't mind, let me try to jog your memory after the program's over.
Okay.
Could you reminisce with the Colonel then, please?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, let's do that, because I got to keep moving here if you don't mind, Colonel.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to close her up here. I want to take,
Okay.
if you don't mind, please.
I don't mind.
All right, I would like all the Korean War vets in the audience to stand up, please, besides our panelists up here. And let's give them a hand, please. Thank you very much for your presence. Thank you very much for being here. Obviously, we want to extend the recognition to our distinguished panel. And Robert, you get back up here, man. I'm sorry I took you out. Everybody knows Robert here real well, and I knew that he wouldn't mind. But you get back up there and receive the recognition of the audience for your participation in this magnificent panel. They just did wonderful for us. Thank you very much. We are going to close with the rendition by Sharon Balthrop of our favorite song here. And I believe, as I introduce Sharon, that many of you will begin to say that she is the Kate Smith of our generation, for our hospital. That's for sure.
I would tell you that my father is a Korean War veteran.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my family in the strife, I'd thank my God above to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, from New York to LA. There's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say